Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby, and we are rolling through January, you guys. I know I say this every week, but I'm just amazed at how quickly time seems to be moving. But what we're going to talk about tonight is something that it could be talked about in every season because it's always important. We're going to talk about civic engagement, why you should go out or consider going out for local office and why you should even pay attention, right? I mean, we often hear about local elections, and it is really important to understand who's running, what's going on, and to consider getting involved yourself because it is important and it can make a difference. Before I introduce my guests, I always like to say a little bit about how I know them because, and this is my mini TED talk I'll give every week because I think it's so important that we're open to meeting people, that we're open to being connected for a variety of reasons. I feel like not only are we divided in this country in this time, but we're also becoming a little bit divided by our devices. We spend a lot of time on them, doom scrolling. We're not really connecting as much with people. And I understand that can be hard for people who are a little bit more introverts. I totally respect that. But when we get out and maybe it's just stretching our boundaries a little bit, stretching our comfort level, I should say, maybe trying a new class, maybe it's an exercise class or an art class or a drawing class or going to attend an art show or a performance or a business card exchange. And we talk to people, we share our business cards, we exchange them, we just share a little bit about ourselves, learn about other people. You never know what that can lead to, and you can always help people out. So I have two women with me tonight who are fantastic. I met Jen Partyka, Jen Graham Partyka. We actually know each other since way back in the hood. We're both North Scranton girls. And Jen and I reconnected through the years. She had reached out. She was supportive of me when I came out with a book. She bought it from me. We chatted. And Jen also had me at the hospital where she was working at Geisinger CMC, and I did some laughter yoga for her nurse staff in the morning as a way to stress relieve. And we've stayed in touch ever since. And Jen is really involved in local politics, and we're going to talk to Jen in a minute. And then Sabrina Hannon. This I'm excited to learn about Sabrina because I don't know too much about Sabrina, honestly. I met Sabrina recently. I spoke at the Family Service Association's Family Week conference. And I was talking about the value of laughter and humor and helping us just to de stress and change our mindset and all of that. And Sabrina was at my table. And of course, I have seen Sabrina as well at Retro Cafe, where we both like to get our Java or whatever it is Sabrina gets. I get my latte and we run into each other there. So it's been so nice to reconnect with Sabrina as well. So welcome, Jen, and welcome, Sabrina.
Thanks. You.
Thank you both for joining me tonight. I'm really excited to get to know, like I said, more about you, Sabrina, and to learn more, Jen, what you've been up to because I follow your Instagram and it's very active, especially when it comes to like nurse advocacy and also being involved with the local Democratic Party. But let me get started with Sabrina. Sabrina, tell me a little bit. Like we met that day, we were both at the same table and we chatted a little bit, and you were in my breakout session. Excuse me. So I got to learn a little bit about you just from what you shared, which I appreciated, about your dog, about your road trips that you like to take, different things. But whatever you want to share with the audience, just to give a little sense of background for my listeners to get to know you a bit, if you want to share a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Good memory, by the way. You might actually hear my dog snoring in the background. So if you hear, it'll sound like a light snoring. It's very loud snoring to me, but if you hear that, that's him. He's a harsh critic. Um, but yeah, so I am originally from the area. I am a Glenburn resident for basically my entire life, other than when I went to school. Let's see. Um, what got, am I just giving you a general background about me or like how my
Yeah, just
interests
share
led?
a little bit
Okay.
about yourself. Yeah, so you're a local person like Jen and I, both from the area. So you that I think that helps because that helps you to understand the people here.
Oh yeah, yeah, most definitely, especially like coming from a really small township that a lot of people don't even know exists. They just assume we're part of Clark Summit, sometimes part of Dalton or Waverly, but yeah, and I went to college at Wilkes University, and then grad school at Southern Connecticut State University, where I majored in women's studies with a concentration in violence against women and children, um, and came back to the area. I wasn't sure I was going to stay, honestly, because I thought like work-wise, it would probably be best for me to head to a big city. But I want like I made the decision to stay for numerous reasons. One of them being like, I was like, I can't be the only one who feels like this. Like I was really missing this feminist connection that I had had. And after the 2016 election, I really found my people. I started a group at the time. It was a chapter of now the National Organization of Women. We have transitioned now into being our own entity, Persist NEPA, and just doing activism through like small grassroots activism throughout the area. I've always been community minded. My mother was very community minded. She actually went to the town meetings a lot when I was a kid, and I was a Girl Scout for like 14 years of my life. So like it was just always ingrained in me that like you take part in your community, you give back to your community, and you leave places better than how you found them.
Yeah, and I love that. You hear that too when you go into the forest, right? Take what you
Hmm.
brought in. You want to leave it better than you found it. We'll go to Jen for a second, just so the audience can hear a little bit from you. But I did hear of Persist. I'm glad. I didn't realize that was you, but I've seen that on Instagram, and I know you guys have been doing a lot, like I think writing postcards, reaching out to legislators. That the important work, like you said, the grassroots that needs to happen. So we'll come back to you in a second here, Sabrina. Jen, you've been on before on the podcast, and we focused mostly before on nurse advocacy, because I know your motto was nurse advocacy is patient advocacy, right? So when we're advocating for our nurses, it helps the patients too. And that was, I don't know if you're still involved in healthcare, but I know that you're very active in the Democratic locally in the Abington Democrats especially. But tell us a little bit, in case anyone, believe it or not, there might be people out there who did not listen to that episode. Shameful that they didn't. No, I'm just kidding. But
My own mother was, I was like, did you listen? She's like, oh, I have to get to it. So I 100%. So my name is Jen Partyka. I always say I'm a nurse, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, but like more so than anything, I feel like at this stage of the game, my kids are grown. I have pets, but like most of my commitment, outside of my job really tends to be towards the community. So I find myself being involved in, I served on the board for Pennsylvania State Nurses Association. I still serve on the board for the Nursing Foundation of Pennsylvania. I'm involved in the Northeast Pennsylvania Film Festival, which is coming up, and it's going to be so much fun. Please go. But I try to. It's very funny when you're like a nurse who says what needs to be said, you kind of fall into some of these other activities that tend to be political. So when I was with Pennsylvania State Nurses Association, I worked with the Government Relations Committee. I was the treasurer for their PAC. Was very involved politically on about nursing issues, patient issues, in the midst of Roe v. Wade being overturned, bodily autonomy, a lot of the healthcare issues that kind of were the casualties in the midst of that particular decision really got me riled up, because I have a 26-year-old daughter, and she's not going to have fewer rights than I had, and so in the midst of just kind of saying what needed to be said, I have absolutely created my own little ripple in like the pond. And it's very interesting, because I was very happy to have been serving as Glenburn's auditor. So I have one of my master's degrees is from Wilkes, just like you. The other is from the University of Scranton. That was kind of my alma mater, but one of the degrees I got was just this master's in nurse executive, right? So I was kind of good at like budgets and things like. So I was Glenburn Township's auditor, but we had an opening, and I started learning about being a supervisor. And then I found out that I was the first woman appointed supervisor in the entire history of Glenburn. So I'm like, oh no, no, that can't be. So I was very lucky. Sabrina and I have a couple of Andrews in common. I always say that we have a couple friends in common, and I'm made it abundantly clear that we needed another Democratic candidate up here. There were basically three seats open, and only two candidates. So I wanted the third one to be a Democrat, and I had the pleasure of being introduced to her by our Andrews. But she was like a gem. She was an absolute gem. I really believe that people who work with the communities, like nurses, like social workers, like what Sabrina does. Sabrina's on the front lines of a lot of people who are kind of facing crises. That's when you find out what's not working. These, I feel like we are natural people to be in kind of like that public service realm. So I was very pleased to meet her. I'll talk about anything you want to talk about, but I know specifically today we're going to talk a little bit about just kind of serving the community in this particular capacity.
Yeah, so I do want to mention too, thanks to you, Jen, that I did have two other fantastic women on the podcast who are also in politics. Senator Kozarowski was on the podcast, and also Keir Bradford Gray, who did not get the nomination, the Democratic
Yeah,
nomination for it was state attorney general, right?
she
My
was
memory
Attorney
is,
General. Yeah.
yeah. And she was phenomenal. And you got me. I will say this much. This is why this matters too. You introduced me via text. You're like, do you want to have her on the podcast? I'm like, absolutely. She was willing. She was like a force. I mean, I had
Yeah.
her on and she was phenomenal to the point where it moved me to actually go out. And I don't usually volunteer with politically, but I stood outside the polls with the handbills or whatever you want to call them for her because I believed in her. I went to her fundraiser and I loved meeting her in person and her staff.
Yeah.
They were lovely. And I
Yep.
was disappointed she didn't win, but I loved that her voice was out there, her face was out there,
That's right.
and it was important. And I appreciated the connection and having her on and
Well,
getting to know her. She was wonderful.
she came in like second place in that primary in Lackawanna County. Like we did good by Keir. We really did. Unfortunately, Eugene was like the name, but Keir was, she did really well here in Lackawanna County, and that was, in part to Janine Luby.
Well, I don't know about that, but okay, I'll take that. And I'm sure in part to you and everybody who was helping her, but she was wonderful, and I loved what she had to say. I loved her fierceness, her, and just I think a lot of women do bring that to what they do. But I
Mm-hmm.
want to follow up on what you said there, Jen. But I want to ask you about this, Sabrina. I think it's an important and interesting point you made about folks like you who are out there in the system, but also dealing with people. So you see the struggles they're facing with the system, whether it be with financial assistance, nutritional assistance, and running into issues where there is domestic violence and they're not being maybe protected enough, or things like that that you're seeing, and you have big hearts and you're trying to help, but you also know you want to try to help them maybe manage this system and make it better. And it makes sense. And I remember when Bridget Kozarowski was running and people are like, well, what does a nurse know about politics? And you'll hear stuff like that. But to your point, you guys are out there on the front lines and seeing both sides. So Sabrina, if you don't mind talking a little bit to that and like why that point is so valid, like you're out there seeing the real stories, so like the qualitative, I guess you could say, but the quantitative of look what they're having to deal with, all of this red tape or all these hoops they have to jump through. So share a little bit about that and what you've seen and how that's motivated you.
Yeah, and I don't think I mentioned this before. So I do work at WRC. I've been there for a little over 6 years now. I run the medical advocacy program. It started when I did, um, which has been very rewarding. And I think one of the key things is when you work in healthcare, or if you work in social work, or you work in domestic violence, something where people feel okay being vulnerable with you because they know you're a safe person. People share their stories, and I'm sure Jen can tell you that the second someone finds out she's a nurse, I'm sure they're like, "Can you look at my rash?" Or
Yeah.
whatever. People like the second they know that you're going to understand their trauma, a lot of people will just share it because they know they've maybe for the first time found someone that's safe to talk to. And it's unfortunate too that like how to get it like so many um systems are difficult to navigate. And in my personal opinion, they are difficult to navigate on purpose.
Mm.
Um, and it goes a lot towards discouraging folks from using the systems that are supposed to be there to help them, but it goes back to the whole like, well, who created these systems? And um, you know, it's it's really important that we have people who know how to move through those systems and how they actually work versus people who think they know how things work. Who are like, oh, yeah, well, when your partner attacks you, you call 911, the police come, and the problem's over. And that's simply not the case. In Lackawanna County, we have the issue of the police will show up and they don't remove someone. They will tell the guy, this is a experience of someone I know personally, so I can share it. Not through work. And they told the guy who was beating up his pregnant girlfriend, just go into the other room and calm down. And she was like, no, he doesn't live here. I want him gone. And they refused to remove him. Nothing happened, but she was told, like, if you call us again, we're going to arrest both of you. And people don't know that that's happening. And certainly not all cops, of course, are doing that. There, you do have those who care. There was just that article in the paper about how PFAs in Lackawanna County have gone up, and it's not because we're seeing more abuse. It's because the police officers are passing along the information on, contact WRC. These are your options. So like we are making some headway there, but not everyone is getting the same service level, right? And a lot of things go into that. And understanding that when you're someone who now has a chance to change the system or make it more accessible to folks is huge.
Yeah. Is that and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but is that often an issue of like neighborhood and race that comes into play with how people are treated?
That can definitely economic status, sexuality, all the you can also have if you have a police officer who shows up at a scene and they themselves are an abusive partner, they're identifying with the abuser, and we don't want that either.
Mm.
So there's a lot of factors that can go into making a bad situation worse.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that for sure. Is there, I had guests on a few months ago. It was a woman that had done this wonderful documentary about a young woman in Kansas, and it made national attention. The prosecutor there did not want to prosecute the case. What started out as a consensual relationship became rape and violent rape. They didn't want to prosecute it. Thanks to many people who helped, she called upon this like very old 1889 something law in Kansas to call her own grand jury. And so the documentary talks about that. But I had a couple of folks on the podcast, and the one woman who is a former prosecutor talked about, and I'm not going to remember the acronym, but there's certain training for law enforcement to work specifically with victims of sexual violence and assault. And I feel like maybe it's not as common yet. It's not like everywhere. And I don't think we have it here in our region.
So police officers, much like nurses and other professions, have to get a certain amount of training hours every year. However, it's up to their discretion what they're getting. So the police officers who care, who want to know more about sexual assault and how to work better with those who are experiencing it. Same thing with like human trafficking or domestic violence. Those are the ones who are showing up and getting the training. The ones who don't care or think people are lying, etc., they're not. And those are the ones who really need the training. So, some states do have it required that you have to get X amount of training. Pennsylvania currently does not and have like mandated you need X amount of sexual assault training.
Okay. Yeah. So
for
the mandate
officers.
is the mandatory would make the difference there. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
know they were talking a lot about training that many of them are involved in is trauma informed. So that, that the folks involved who are doing the interviews, that are doing all this, understand what that's like so that you're not treating a victim or someone who's been abused like, a criminal in many cases, is what happens.
Yeah, one of the things that I talk about a lot, and again, this is going to cross over into things that Jen's very familiar with. It's common for people who have experienced sexual assault, domestic violence, or human trafficking, like when the police are called, there's a very good chance they've already sustained like a traumatic brain injury. And anytime we start experiencing trauma, whether it's physical or emotional, etc., our brain starts filing the information differently. And the funny thing is, police understand that when it comes to them. Like if an officer is involved in a shooting, they have 3 days before they have to file their report. But when they show up on scene or they're at the hospital, they want to interview them then, now. And if their story changes, which it likely will because like of how things are being stored in the brain or trauma that the brain has received, well, then that's held against them. And it's like, well, clearly you're lying because your story has changed. And that's just not how brains work.
Yeah, yeah. And Jen, I want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit of your knowledge on that. And I know, ladies, I'm departing from the the civic engagement part, but I just find this is interesting, and I think it's valuable for people to hear about too. So Jen, do you want to share? I know your experience with that as well, because I saw you nodding your head. I'm sure you're familiar with all this too.
I had some limited exposure to this when I worked in the ER. I worked in a community hospital emergency room off and on for the better part of about 5 years. Between I got bounced between ICU, ER, and house supervisor. So, but I will most of my experience in that realm, has not been anywhere near what Sabrina's has been. So, and I just want to quickly point out, like, isn't she great? Isn't she like the kind of person that you want to bring into a place? Like, it's so not intuitive, I will say, to say, oh, you work with the public. Why don't you, we always think like lawyers should be in politics, or we think, like there's just certain people we think should be in politics and not necessarily the people who really understand their communities, like someone like Sabrina. So it makes me incredibly happy that we have, someone like Sabrina, and really so many of the, Bridget Kozarowski. Oh my God, like what an absolute treasure she was when you look at what we went through, starting in March of 2020, right? So thank God someone like Bridget was in office. Like it's so amazing to take women from maybe some of these, frontline, public facing positions who truly understand what's going on in their communities. My experiences, I will say, as a nurse, absolutely contribute to the way I feel like I can serve my community. I feel like I understand, some of the obstacles when it comes to, I would discharge people from my peri-op area to who are homeless. Like guess what? They're probably coming back with an infected wound. They're probably like there's so many things that you have to understand when you deal with people who don't have the same resources, maybe that you grew up with, and it makes you very aware. And I'm not gonna. I hate to pick on, like, your typical white man, your typical like very confident mediocre white man, right? But they really think they have it all figured out. They think that they
Mm-hmm.
know what life is like. You have absolutely no clue. And the more you get people like Sabrina, who have kind of seen people who have been struggling, that those are the people who can look at policy and say, okay, actually, this is not going to work, because guess what? This leaves out this entire segment of our population that is not being represented by this particular piece of legislation. This is the kind of person that you want in office. And it's very interesting. My father-in-law made this comment. We were together, and he's like talking about his HOA. And he was like, yeah, they're like the kind of people that run for office. And I said, well, listen, I'm gonna I'm going to make you walk that back, because if you as a good person do not run for office, look at these schmucks that do. Like, you absolutely should be stepping up. If you have the time and the capacity, guess what? Your community needs you, and you should be doing this, and I will help you. If you live in Lackawanna County, I will help you figure out how to do it. Because this last election was absolutely telling. People are not happy with the way things are right now. I was super ridiculously obsessed with the judges race. I both pat myself on the back and like shrink a little bit because I'm embarrassed, because I was so overboard with that judges race. But 67% in Lackawanna County, we voted yes. And it was the highest percentage in northeastern Pennsylvania. We put up 5 billboards, we got money. Like, we did so much work on that judges race, and it absolutely paid off. And people, that pendulum swing, is swing a word? The pendulum swung, swing.
Swung, yeah. Swung and swang.
It went the other direction, and we absolutely have to stay on that momentum. And if you get anything at all from this podcast today, if you are a good person and you want good things for your community, consider running for office. Because if you don't, these schmucks do, and they're absolutely destroying our communities. So, okay, now I'll shut up and chew Sabrina's expertise on this particular topic. I don't think I can hold a candle to it, but I'm just so glad that someone like her is willing to serve their community.
And I wanted, just for listeners, what Jen was talking about, the judges race, it was to retain, right, the Pennsylvania judges. And when you're saying we put up billboards, I believe, are you talking about the Abington Democrats or the Lackawanna County Democrats?
So, no, the Abington Democrats did it. The Lackawanna County Democrats, and I say this with absolute confidence that nothing I'm saying will get you into any trouble. I am 100% positive I'm right on this. The Lackawanna County Democrats did not order one yard sign, not one. The Lackawanna County Democrats did not do anything for that race that I am aware of. There were a few placards that the state, because I spoke with the Pennsylvania Dems on it, the state sent some postcard materials that we did track down. We were able to get, and we had access to, and I was able to put that in some of the events that I was able to put together. But it was the Abington Democrats. Also combined with, I found rich Bostonians who were willing to invest in Pennsylvania elections. It was amazing. So we were able to put up 5 billboards. We collaborated with Columbia County and, believe it or not, Luzerne County to get judge signs, because Luzerne County, Columbia County, and Wyoming County. Red counties, by the way. To try to get judge signs, because Lackawanna County didn't order any. So we really, really struggled during that particular election, because here we have, billionaire Jeffrey Yass putting $6 million he spent on trying to mislead Democrats. Your super voter Democrats all received postcards that told them, vote for what do they say, term limit. Like, it was, he just confused the whole, I don't even know how it was legal, but he was able to do this. He spent $6 million on it here in Pennsylvania, and still in Lackawanna County, which, we're not necessarily the bluest place anymore. We were 67% yes to retain. Monroe County was 64% yes to retain, and the other counties were all less than 50 here in northeastern Pennsylvania. So we really, really knocked it out of the park, and that was no thanks to our, and if you want to run for Lackawanna County Democratic Committee, I can help you do that too. And I hope you'll consider it, because we absolutely need to get people on that committee who are willing to do the work. The work is so important. When you don't do the work, look what's happening in our world. Like, you have to absolutely work to keep Democrats in these seats. We are a blue county. I don't understand what happened. We were a blue state. I don't understand what happened, but we have to continue to keep working on that. And every event you go to, you'll see the Lackawanna County Republicans have a tent up. They're registering voters. Bob Bolus has his stupid 2015 anti-Hillary trucks everywhere. Like, it's not 2015 anymore. Hillary's not running for anything, but he's got those stupid trucks there everywhere, and he's showing up and he's making noise, and they're walking around with, bullhorns and making, asses out of themselves. But guess what? They're there. So, so we need better organization and people willing to do the work. And sometimes the work is just being a resource. Like, I'm not going to say I do anything all that spectacular or special. I'm just a resource for people who want to do things. And those are the kind of people that we need. So please, please reach out if you're interested.
Yeah. And I will say on this, and I don't want to make this I am a Democrat, but I don't want to make this all about Democrat Republican. But I will say to that point, and so yes, there it seems like there needs to be some more new life, perhaps, let's say, with the Lackawanna County Democrats. But I think, as you mentioned, how we used to be more blue. I think there's also something the whole Democratic Party across the country, obviously, they need to address, right? There's some fractures there. There's not working together. There's this faction, that faction getting siloed, and there's work that needs to be done, I think, across the whole country with Democrats. But I
Yeah.
certainly don't know the answers to any of that right now, so I'm not. But I'm just saying it's a variety of things. But yes, locally, you're right, that needs someone. Needs to be some new life, and there needs to be people to step in, and because local politics, it does matter. And I want to come back to Sabrina with that. So what motivated you, and why you, like Jen, believe it's important to have that passion? I mean, and it sounds like your mom, you said, attended meetings. So I think that's important that you saw that as a kid. If you saw your mom doing that, that had to mean something to you as an example to you.
Oh yeah. One of my earliest memories. So I think I was in it was either first or second grade when Bill Clinton was running for president the first time. And I remember when my mom was getting ready to vote, she was a single mom, so like I would go with her, to cast her ballot back when it was like I've seen it so many different ways, but I remember the lovers. But I remember when she was putting on her makeup to go vote, giving her a whole presentation on why she should vote for Bill Clinton. And when I was older, she said to me, she was like, it was really strange because you had really good points as like a 6-year-old, but I remember her telling me like, Sabrina, this is my vote, and you can't tell me how to vote. You can't tell anyone else how to do that. And I would just remember like huffing and walking away. But um,
Can
when
I
I was
ask how you knew at 6? Were you watching TV and learning about it? Were you reading? Were you hearing in school? Because that's, to be informed at 6 is pretty good.
My parents definitely both talked about it. My dad was also very like into politics. He wound up being sent to Vietnam. He did 2 tours, and it was he was one of the people who he agreed to do the second tour, but the first one he didn't really have a choice in. It was he got a DUI, and so he was told, "You're either going to war or you're going to jail," and he chose to go to war. Um, yeah, so which I also think probably says something about our jail systems, but um, the I remember like both of them always like talking a lot about politics. My dad very much so from like the veterans side. My mom was also disabled with a traumatic brain injury. So, and she was still active as like a single mom in the Abingtons. I grew up extraordinarily poor in a very rich school district with a learning disability. So, it's really in my best interest to be interested in politics because, I was one of those people who, um, SNAP benefits could have like really done a lot of harm. I grew up on SNAP. I grew up going to food banks. I was an Angel Tree kid, and so like as an adult now, I'm making sure I give back to those things, but I also want to make sure they're preserved. So I think, and I'm very open about the fact that that's how I grew up because I think people have such an idea of like there's this poverty loop, which is true. There is, but it's not that people want to stay in those loops. I was very lucky in that I went to Abington that recognized that I had a learning disability when I was in like my teacher in first grade recognized it, and she worked with me that summer for free to get me like better with reading. Um, and then from second grade on, I was in one of the best special education programs in the country. So by the time I got to college, which Abington also paid for me to send out my college applications because I couldn't afford it. They did things like that. And without that kind of those sorts of things, and like them paying to get my testing done to show that I had like a learning disability when going to college, which then opened me up for other scholarships and like funding from the state and all this other stuff. Like they set me up for success in a way that like if I was going to Scranton High, that would never have happened. Or, you know, other schools in the area. So I lucked out significantly. I always say like my life is a little like Pretty in Pink in that way, like that the movie from the 80s. Um but so definitely that my being involved in Girl Scouts, and I've just always had a real interest in fairness, and like it doesn't make sense to me that we're not taking care of one another. Like I very much so see myself as a community builder. That's where my interests lie. Um, when I was younger, I thought about like just going straight into politics, but I've always joked that if I got into higher politics, I would be assassinated. So um,
No.
um, I think a lot of people right now are coming to the realization at how important local and state politics are because of data centers, and like AI and all of that. Um, and I completely forgot where I was going with all of this. So you'll have to ring me back in.
No,
But
that's okay. That's all right. I and as I brought up the importance of being involved locally, what started your passion and getting involved? I want to ask you a question, and then I'll ask Jen after too. And this is not meant to be a gotcha, but I'm like, this is just a what are your thoughts on this? So you mentioned, you want to be a community builder and with heart, and we should be taking care of one another. I love that philosophy. Like that is true. We should be empathetic. We should be leading with kindness. You don't that doesn't tend to be popular, right? And it's tear the other person apart. It's negativity, and the system, there seems to be so many challenges. So, and again, this is just meant to be like, so where do you begin? Like I know you must, it's important then that someone like you gets in the inside, right? So you get the position so that you can be involved maybe with changing policies and things like that. But I guess that the key is, as I'm asking you, obviously we can't destroy the system all at once or all the bad stuff at once, but maybe baby steps. Is that the so when you're thinking about it, is that the approach? Like, wow, there's so much work to be done?
yeah, so we didn't get here overnight. Like it's so we're not going to undo all the bad overnight. My genuine thought is you have to start local. It's not trickle down, it's trickle up. That's how things change, I think. Because right now at the national level, clearly kindness or civility it's not even in the same hemisphere.
No.
So, but locally, you still see that, right? You still see people, and that's one of the things when I was talking to voters, when I was, because I did a write-in campaign, like, so I stood outside and talked to people. Jen gave me a nice little push, like, go talk to them. And I was like, okay, I got this. Um, and that was the big thing because when I said I was a community builder and like my one of the things that I really want to do is get like programs going where neighbors help neighbors. Like I think we don't know our neighbors, and that includes me. Like I live in a neighborhood where I know the people who are on either side of me, but that's it. And like I see these people all the time, but I don't know them. So getting back to that, because when I was little, that was not the case. Like I knew everyone in the neighborhood. So through my mother, obviously I wasn't like unsupervised going up to people's houses. Um, but I think, and I've heard from so many people from all ages that they want to get back to that, or not even necessarily, but like just create that because for a lot of people, they don't have a recollection of community like that. And you can trace that all the way back to, I think it was the 1960s when the CIA really invested in breaking up communities. And that's a whole other kit and caboodle, but it was a long, yeah. So make like turning people against each other. So I think if I still really am a big believer in there's more that unites us than divides us.
Yes.
Um, that being said, there are certain things that I will not tolerate. So, I'm not okay with people making other people feel unsafe. And that is a hard line that I draw.
Yeah, yeah. And you bring up a good point. And then Jen, I want to ask you kind of the same question about how do you tackle this? The idea of community. And I think I forget if it was Oregon or where it was, where there was this potluck where people go and it was this like 60 people coming together once a year and it was this annual thing. But you mentioned about the community, and I don't know if you both are probably familiar with the idea of the third place or third space, where it's like home is one, work is the other, and then there used to be that third space or third place, I guess they refer to it as, whether it was like, the Rotary, or you were part of a bowling team, or you quilted, women quilted, like back in the day. And we've gotten away from that, and it is so important that we get back to that, because community is so important. And then you have that person you can rely on. Oh, my car is broke, can you get me to the doctors, can and just sharing and doing for one another. So I do think that idea is so key, and it's encouraging to hear that people want to get to that space. I think that is so important. Jen, what would you say along the lines of the same question? Like, as Sabrina said, it didn't happen overnight, so it's not gonna, we can't just deconstruct it overnight, but there is a lot to take on. So how do you when you're thinking ahead and you want to continue in local politics, how do you figure how you can address that?
Well, it's interesting. I always say that I bring like favorite Aunt Jenny energy into like spaces. And so and I toured with the Grateful Dead for 3 years in a 71 bus and did all that fun stuff. So I love like I when people start expressing that kind of stuff to me, I feel like warm and fuzzy. But I will say there are a few specific things that Sabrina and I have on our agenda as we look at it right now. So we are currently becoming a bipartisan um, board of supervisors. We are literally officially appointing a Republican. Now, he's not a Republican who uses terrible words. He's not a Republican who speaks ill of other human beings that like, because that would be on, like Sabrina said, there's just some things I will not accept from people. But so we're literally, reaching across the aisle. We're bringing this guy on board. He's a wonderful guy, very, very, very qualified for the job, and it is absolutely the best thing for our community to bring this gentleman on our board. So that's one thing that we're doing. We also we have some environmental things going on here in the Glenburn area. We have the trolley trail. We have the Countryside Conservancy. We have been kind of partnering with that group. Some of the people on the board for Countryside are actually serve like in our recreational board and our planning commission, things like that. So we have a really good relationship with a lot of people that are like-minded in that sense. Our first, there's a county grant. Hopefully all of you who are in government have applied for it. But it's basically for the 250th birthday of the country. Every municipality is getting $1,000, and we're teaming up with the trolley trail to try to do some kind of community event. We're involving the Lackawanna Historical Society. So I feel, and it's very interesting because Sabrina gave me the opportunity to stand outside on election day. And so when we were standing outside on election day, Sabrina opened up the conversation, but I got to talk to a lot of people who really just want to be involved in the community. I feel like I love to throw a party. I am the past PTA president, ran lots of boards and activities when I was in Scranton. Like, I'm happy to kind of pursue that. I feel like this sense of community that all of us as Americans have had is just non-existent anymore. So I'm happy to contribute to that. I think that we have a few things lined up that are kind of some new ideas here in Glenburn Township, and not to say that the guys who have served our community have not done a good job. They absolutely have. They've done. It's very interesting what you learn when you fall into, like, they're talking about like roads and like maintenance equipment and things that I as a registered nurse have never dealt with, but you learn a lot, and you see who's good at what, and I'm just honestly here to facilitate the things that are going to be good for our community. And that means everybody in my community. When I'm a nurse, I take care of my patients. I don't ask you, and honestly, sometimes I don't want to know, but like, I don't ask you what your, political
Yep.
beliefs are or whatever. I'm
Amen.
here. I do my job. I will continue to do my job as a supervisor here in Glenburn, and I will represent the community however they need to be represented. And I know Sabrina has that same kind of professionalism when it comes to representing people, because I know that some of the people she deals with are not necessarily, on my side of the aisle, either, and that's okay, because we have a common goal and we can figure it out. So I think I'm looking forward to, specifically, there was one guy in particular. Remember Ron, Sabrina? He was like, I just want to be involved. Like, there a lot of that energy is coming forward, here in our little 5 square mile kingdom of Glenburn, and it's heartening, and I think that probably a lot of communities feel this way. Like, we're seeing some stuff going on that we're not comfortable with. We'd really like to get back to, what makes us like each other and what makes things better where we live. And hopefully, Sabrina and I can be, and eventually Jan can be, the people who can help make that happen.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned the trails, the trolley trail and the conservancy. I love going to the trails there at Lackawanna State Park, the conservancy. Beautiful, beautiful. And I think that's key to community too. I'm a big fan of nature that like heals me all the time. So getting community there and together, I think is great. And you did say something else that I do want to just my own personal take on something I want to mention about, when we're treating someone as a nurse, you'll treat everyone and you're there for everyone. I think that's part of what we need to get back to as far as the country, as like whether you're wearing a red hat or a blue hat, like that stuff has to, like, I get the boundaries, like you're not going to accept certain behavior, totally get that. But I think we need, and I say this because I have some folks in my life who I see a lot of the posts where it's like, you voted for this, we have to stop with the this is your fault stuff, because while that might be anger, like for me, I was never there, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I thought that's never valuable. Like I was living my life and, making my comments, but you did this, you voted for this is your fault. That stuff has to be away by now. It's got to go, because if we are going to unite, sitting and pointing only continues the division. So I don't care what party you're in. If you're doing that, I think it's wrong. You know what I mean? I think the coming together on the things that unite us, which I think is so key, is where we need to head. And I've said that with my laughter yoga. I don't know who's sitting there who might surprise me, like, oh, they voted that way. I don't want to know, because guess what? When I'm leading laughter and we're sharing in that and we're all feeling better and healthier and lighter, that's my point. So I don't want to know more and divide more, because it's not important to me, and I don't think we should focus on the division. But that's just my 2 cents, and just because you mentioned that, I just it because I really feel strongly about that. If we're going to unite and heal, the pointing and the blaming and the stuff has to go away, and it's a little too late for that anyway, but it's got to go away. So
On that same breath, though, I will say I have one family member that is, every time something terrible, like objectively terrible happens, I support it. That's what I voted, and I'm like, ugh. So that's the stuff I'd really rather not know. Because I will say that definitely poison. Like, I just, he's not somebody I want to be around. I hope he never becomes my patient. I'll have to claim he's my family member and step away.
Yeah. And I get that, but I think my point is that that's an exception. I think a lot of people, there's this I'll say misbelief. It's like, oh, this is what they wanted. I don't really believe so. And I do believe some people were coming from a place of misinformation, coming from a place of fear and thinking things would be different than they are. But again, I don't want to go down that path. I just think that focusing as much as we can on the commonalities will maybe help to move the needle and bring us closer together. So I like the idea of what you said there. I love the idea of community, because that's how you make it happen, bringing people together. And the fact that folks are excited to participate and want to, that's wonderful to hear. And I know that with the two of you on board, it's going to be great. So Sabrina, along those lines, what do you see as we'll start to close out here, but what are you excited about or hopeful about as you go into this year? as far as, what you're planning with the community?
Yeah, so I I'm hopeful about actually like by the end of 2026 to have that sense of community at least starting to bubble more, right? To have like things in motion, that it like that groundwork that's done. I think I'm a big believer in meeting people where they're at. So getting people information in a way that is helpful to them and digestible. I'm a big believer in. And I think another thing that, and Jen's been great about this, is I think restoring people's belief and trust in their local government in Glenburn and just having transparency. The more like that we can be like, this is what we're doing, this is what's happening. Please be involved. Like, we want you here. We don't want to keep you out. Like, you live here. And the more, I mean, researchers showed the more that you can get people to invest in their community and to feel that they're a part of it, the more likely they are to stay, the better health outcomes you have for that community, the safer the community. Generally, even like the cleaner the community because people pick up their trash more. Maybe you have less doggy doo-doo on the trail, you know? So, very much so, I think it is a reasonable and attainable goal for us to get there by the end of the year. Not like where everyone's, happily, like at the end of the Grinch holding hands and singing, necessarily, but where we have neighbors meeting neighbors and building that community.
That
And I
that sounds
think,
great.
yeah,
I'm
and
sorry,
I
go
think,
ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say, and I think that'll lay groundwork for not just the next year, but like that can really like change the trajectory of people's lives.
Yeah, no, that's a fair goal, right? That sounds fair, reasonable. I think that's great. And now you're just starting here in the politics, so I think you probably have to see how it goes. But if it goes well, would you be interested maybe in other positions, you think? Or do you want to see how things go first before you start thinking bigger?
Oh, very much so would want to see how things go. I'm very happy to do my 2 years of like learning what this is all about and seeing, what's what. Maybe this will be like supervisor will be a good fit for me, maybe another position. I definitely think I'll want to stay like connected to the local government regardless. But like I don't have any like aspirations for like being governor, for example. So I will say I've had friends for years telling me that I needed to get into politics. So I'm glad to be where I'm at.
Yeah. And that's reasonable. That's good. Now, Jen, you've been involved a little more from definitely helping others, it seems, too. Helping like with Kier and all that. You're definitely out there behind the scenes and doing the grunt work and at the protests around the square. I saw you, Abington Democrats were all about that. What about your aspirations? Or are you happy to be like in this role and helping get other people to fill these positions that need to be filled?
You know, it's as long as I keep having good representation, I'm cool. Like I'm fine with not but like I said, I feel like when the opportunity is like you can't complain. You can complain, but you shouldn't complain. If you're able to do something better, like if you sit there and you go, if you're like armchair quarterbacking, like every single thing that your rep is doing, then guess what? Maybe you need to step. So I think about it that way. I am very like we right now in Glenburn have Jim Haddock. He does a great job. Um, the next uh your rep and Clark Summit's rep is Bridget Kozarowski. Amazing. The Kyle Mullen, Kyle Donahue, the four of them are so great together. I love them. But they like do such a good job. They communicate constantly. They're always like they travel as like a pack. They're adorable. And they do a great job. I do know that Marty Flynn is being primaried right now. Also a nurse. I'm not sure what'll happen with that. I'm not sure how that'll go. Um, but for right now, I am very happy to do my day job, which is a nurse. I volunteer in the evenings at the Leahy Clinic in Scranton. They could always use your donations, FYI, in case anybody listening to this is looking for a great place to make some donations. That is an amazing place doing amazing work, which their work is going to become much more important in 2026 when so many people lose access to primary care because they can't afford their private insurance or they lose Medicaid. It's going to be an incredibly important investment in our community, and you should definitely consider it. Um, and I am happy just serving my community for right now. Like I said, if somebody gets voted in that is absolutely just slaughtering the valuable, the things that are valuable in our lives, I absolutely will step up. But for right now, I'm very happy with my representation. So I also feel like I've got some skeletons, like, jangling around in a closet, that maybe, that maybe those couple years on tour with the Grateful Dead, who knows what'll come back to haunt me. But for the most part, I've lived a pretty, I've lived a pretty, stable adulthood. So hopefully, and so I do think that to myself. I'm like, I wonder how many people will be like, oh, I saw her at the Philly show in 1994, But
Do you think they'll remember, Jen?
you would not
If
believe
they
the
were
people I
there?
met on tour. You would not believe
Yeah.
the people I met on tour with the Dead. Like, they were amazing people. It's so funny. I won't even bore you. But anyway, great people. So I do feel a real obligation. You mentioned earlier about the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is about 20 years behind the voters. And so I think investing in young people who are willing to serve their communities, because we don't have the best committee right now here in Lackawanna County, I want you to know that the Abington Democrats is a resource for you if you want to run for any office. In 2026, we're looking at the Lackawanna County Committee. Maybe we can create a committee that will support young people who want to run for office. Right now, I don't know that resource necessarily exists. But for right now, you can reach out to it's abingtondemocrats.org. You can reach out through the website, and just ask for help in how to run your campaign. In February, we start the petitions. There are some positions that are open here in Lackawanna County, specifically the committee. We will help you run. We will help you get involved. We will help you do the work that your community needs, which is essentially just being a resource to the people in your district. And just, I feel pretty fulfilled right now. It's so funny. My kids, my oldest son's in Philly. My youngest daughter's in New York. One of my sons is local, and I'm going to make him run for committee. But I keep saying to them, I'm like, run for something, run for auditor, run for run for anything. Just get involved in your community this way. You guys are young, you're smart. I'm still paying the student loans for you guys to have, for your educations. Like, go do something in your community and make it better, because the people who are running, like I said, have, they might not have the best interests of your community at heart. So, and I know my kids' hearts, they're pretty good kids. So I encourage everybody who's young and willing to do so to please be the face and the voice of what needs to happen. Starting locally. All politics is local. Just start considering it, because the need is there, and it's not hard, and we'll help you.
Okay. And I should mention too, every year, or it has been every year, and at the University of Scranton, they usually do a workshop if you are interested in running for office. And I think it's specifically for women,
They
women
don't
who are
do it
interested.
anymore.
Oh, they
They
don't do it
they
anymore?
don't
I
do
was
it. They
gonna say,
lost their funding. So that's why I feel
oh,
like, yeah, that's why I'm
okay.
being like, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but I'm just like over and over saying that, because there are some resources. They're not the resources that might have been there before, but yeah,
Mm.
that program has dissolved.
Okay, because that was Julia Munley. I was friends with her, and she had invited me to come along, because she was going to be running, and she wanted me to hear it, and in case I could help her in some way. And it was a great program. Yeah,
It was
that's
great.
too bad that it's not active anymore. But you've got people like Jen here, the Abington Democrats, anyone that you can reach out to, and I'm sure they'll answer your questions and give you resources. They'll point you in the right direction. So, as we close, is there anything else? And I know with Jen, that might be too broad of a question. So I'll say, is there any other final point that you'd want to make? Sabrina, I'll go to you first and then Jen. I think we covered a lot of great stuff, but if there's anything that you were like, oh gosh, I wish I wanted to make this point. Anything else, Sabrina, that you would want to add?
two things. One, Jen is absolutely a wonderful resource. Like I, my friend Andrew connected me with Jen because needed someone on the ballot, and he knew that like I've always been politically minded, and it's something I've talked about doing before. And it was one of those things where it's like, if I'm looking for a sign, this is it. And she was just so wonderful and so helpful and it took a lot of the scaries out of it, right? Because like doing a writing campaign, basically my information was shared out to people. I attached my LinkedIn so they could see like my professional history. And then it was talking to people that day, and it was easy for me because like there's just the one like voter place. So if it's somewhere larger like Scranton where there's a couple, like that could be a little trickier. You'd have to do a little more thinking. But if it's a smaller municipality, it's one day that you're out there talking to people, and it's worth it, and no one's going to scream at you. That was the big thing, like people, because I there was 2 hours I had to go to a work meeting where I had friends come, and neither one of them had ever done like talked to anyone at polls or done anything like that. They both just really are wonderful humans who were like, I want like I believe in you. So they showed up and they were like, yeah, I can talk about why, you would be good for this. That's not a problem. And they didn't have like that was their big worry that someone would be mean to them, and no one was. I think especially like as like younger women, everyone was just happy to see us there, honestly. Like if you're a younger-ish person, and I'm pushing 40. So like it was actually really great for my self-esteem that day to have so many people tell me I was young. Um, so if you're under or like under 40 and you need a little boost to your ego, just go, like show up at the polls to have people tell you you look young. Um, but yeah, that it wasn't bad. In fact, I forgot how much I really love talking to people, and like it was great. I really liked it. So I think that is like honestly a big hurdle for people. Like, I don't want to have to go door to door. I don't want to have to do da da da. And you don't necessarily have to do those things, especially in smaller places, because people aren't running. And even if people doesn't mean that they're showing up to talk to people. And just honestly, like if you do that, you're a mile above the competition. And I also just wanted to say that like to for me as someone who has been a voter and will continue to vote, someone like Jen is exactly who I want to be voting for. Someone who shows up because like they're not there for like the power, they're not there for the fame of it all. It's because there's a need in their community and they know that like their heart's in the right place. I will always vote for someone who maybe they don't have, the education of like, well, I know all about the laws, but I'm like they're a good human because that moral compass is way more valuable. You can learn other things. It's real hard to learn morals like as an adult. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but usually you need some really traumatic things to happen for that. And we don't want to wish that upon anyone. But yeah. So I would always vote for someone like Jen over anybody else.
Yeah. And that's great. And to your point about getting yelled at, I will say I had not volunteered and that I did for Keir Bradford Gray. And I had that similar, like, oh, what if I get yelled at by someone? But even people who were voting, like, they're like, oh, I'm Republican. They were nice about it. In fact, the one guy was just kind of brusque going in, but he came back out and he goes, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to like brush you off there. Tell me a little bit about her. And he was Republican. He voted Republican. And he came back. He made a point of saying, now tell me about. And I was like, well, that was really nice. I actually had really good experiences, I have to say. So, and that is a good point because sometimes our obviously our narrative in our head that we create is a lot of times worse than what actually ends up happening. Jen, I'll give you the last word. What would I? You've made it clear. run for office. And if you're in the local area here, you are a great resource, as well as the Abington Democrats. Any else other fine point or exclamation point you want to put on anything?
I will not belabor those points. I just want to take a moment to thank Janine for giving people like Sabrina and I the opportunity to talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it. I actually feel like it's a huge, I feel like it's worth celebrating that we are the first women in Glenburn. So I felt like that was, something worth noting. It took until 2025 to get some women, elected, but we did it. And just, thanks Janine for continuing to shine the light on conversations like these, that really do make a difference in our communities. And hopefully you'll come and enjoy. I know that you love nature, so I wanted to quickly tell you that we have the Lackawanna County Conservation District is working with Glenburn to create our first wildflower pollinator meadow. So we have several acres.
Nice.
It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be next to the trolley trail. It's just going to be a very exciting thing. And so with some of our grant money, we're going to try to highlight some of the things that we're doing. But Jim Davis, who was the outgoing Democrat, from Glenburn, started this project. We're going to have the ability to finish it, and it's going to be beautiful. So hopefully we can invite you up to some of the stuff that we have going on at the trolley trail, and hopefully you'll get to enjoy our beautiful wildflower meadow.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Jen. I would love it. I love it. I just got into, I am so, I joke in my stand up that I move over, like I've gotten rid of replace my dating apps with bird identification apps, but it is so true because I am now the dork that, like, I'll say dork, but I say it lovingly because I love it. I've gotten into nature as I've gotten older. I love the birds. I'm learning about gardening and pollinators. So yes, it's a big yes for me. I would love to hear all about that. So keep me informed of that. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I want to thank Sabrina and Jen once more. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know time is valuable and I appreciate yours and I appreciate you sharing your stories. And it is important that you get involved in your local politics. And I will say, especially women. And I'll be thrilled for the day that we don't have to have so many firsts, right? Like, oh, Scranton just had its first female mayor. I mean, like, it's like WTF, like literally, Paige was the first female mayor, and that's kind of freaking ridiculous. But here we are, and it's happened. So let's celebrate that and let's keep moving forward. I think that's the important thing. So thank you again. Thank you to my listeners. As I say each week, if you have a person in mind that you would like to be on the show, like, of course, talk to them first before you talk to me to make sure they'd feel comfortable. But if there's a woman that you know of, talk to them, reach out to me. I'd be happy to have them on the show. Maybe that woman is you. I'd love to have you on. My goal each week is to amplify the voices of women, to inform, to inspire, and entertain listeners. And if you'd like to support important conversations like these, please reach out to me because I have very affordable podcast sponsorship packages. And I'm celebrating 5 years this May. So I am super duper excited about this because I really do believe in it wholeheartedly. So as I say each week, thank you. I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.